Welcome into another edition of Talkin Ducks, and we didn't anticipate the final episode coming at this point because Oregon obviously losing to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. We'll share our thoughts on that, and then really what's up ahead for Oregon and what this means big picture and short term as well too as they try to replace some holes. Let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the crew here. Joining us for the first time in a couple of weeks, Joey Harrington, great to have you back, Anthony Newman, and of course Aaron Fentress. And Joey, let's just get started with you. We haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks. Obviously, this loss to Ohio State, especially what we saw in the first quarter of this game, not what anybody anticipated. And now that we've had a couple of days to think it over, just your thoughts on what we saw down in Pasadena.
It was dumb.
He was bummed. All right.
I didn't say I was bummed. I said that was dumb.
Why don't you give me a breakdown here?
He said it was dumb.
I don't know what the breakdown is. I don't know what my feelings are. I don't know how, what the hell happened? I mean, that's where's my breakdown after the game? It's just that. It's what in the name of God was how? That wasn't. And now I get it, of course. Everybody has those games. What was it? I was, oh God. I was going through some of the old Super Bowl. The team, the Broncos, when they set the all-time scoring record with Peyton in the regular season, went out and lost 45-3 in the first round of the playoffs, right? Those things happen. That's sports. But, not to us, not this year. I'm going to whine a little bit more here. That, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Man, that was dumb. Go to somebody else.
Yeah, Anthony, the last time the Ducks were in a Rose Bowl, I believe, or at least one that you and I were there, we were celebrating as they beat Florida State and they're moving on to the national championship game. And I think it wasn't so much that Oregon just lost to Ohio State. I think it was the manner in how swift and sudden and how immediate this game was over and how everything this team had done all season long to build up to this point, to have the number one overall seed, to be the only undefeated team in all of college football, and to have it end this way in such a dramatically
dumb,
unimpressive fashion. I mean,
fashion.
It's such a contrast to what happened from what we saw from this team all season. And I'm curious, X's and O's wise, Anthony, as a coach and watching this film, where did it go south so quickly and so suddenly for Oregon?
The dudes on the field that play for Ohio State came to play. I mean, give them credit. They have dudes who can play the game very well. And, it's hard to beat somebody twice. You can do it. Yeah, Washington did it to us last year. But it's difficult when you play a tough team. And Ohio State came out and hit them in the mouth early and then hit them again. And then gave them an uppercut. And then kind of knocked them out. It was just wow. I mean, this happened to myself with our high school football team. We jumped on LO, in the first quarter. It was 24-0. We hit them in the mouth. They beat us before in the season. We came back. Ohio State was thinking the same thing. And then when you're trying to come back against a good football team and you're down 31, good luck with that. It's just, or 34? They're down 34? Yeah. So what can you do? What can you say? Oregon has no excuses. They got beat badly. End of story.
Aaron, we've had a lot of Buckeye fans hop in the comments the last couple of weeks leading up into this game, and I'm sure this was very sweet for them, but I'm going to give you your roses, no pun intended. I think you called this thing somewhat perfectly as far as not anticipating this dramatic of a result, but this was an Oregon team that hadn't really gone through the season dominating teams like we'd seen years past, or other teams that had gone to the Rose Bowl or teams that had gone to the national championship. And this was an Oregon team that certainly won all their games, but there were very few games where you felt they were just dominant against great competition. And then this Ohio State team, this iteration, clearly the best team they played all year, and couldn't hold a candle to them for the entire game. And it was over essentially in the first couple of plays, Aaron.
A couple of plays? Okay, first of all, I messaged George the next day, I think. George Reister said, sorry, man. He was like, oh, you're happy. I said, no, I'm not happy. I mean, I give my objective observations, but in no way do I want to see you guys sad and depressed. You know, you guys are my boys. I love you guys, right? But I think what happened was, I mean, a couple of things I talked about all season, right? You're beating a lot of teams in the bottom half of the conference. You won the game against Ohio State, but did that make you better? Or did you just win a really good game? You won a really good game. I felt Ohio State was still better. Then you are feasting on mediocre quarterbacks. Mediocre to bad. I'm still alarmed at how bad the quarterback play was in the conference. I believe that the cost for quarterbacks is going to triple in the next couple of years. We're going to see college quarterbacks making $7, $8, $9 million a year, I think, from some of these programs, because someone like Dylan Gabriel, if you don't have him, you're probably 8-4 if you're the Ducks, or 7-5 maybe if you're going with Dante Moore, who probably wasn't ready. So that was a problem. So then, and also the three toughest teams you played, you gave up a ton of points and a ton of yards. So then you get into this game where neutral site, not at Autzen, a beautiful day. You have a really talented team on the other side, coached by whom offensively? Chip, mother bleeping Kelly. Say what you want about Kelly as a recruiter. Say what you want about Kelly and what happened to UCLA. That dude didn't forget how to dial up stuff on offense, and he was dialing up some stuff. Let's just look at two quick plays real quick. The first touchdown to Jeremiah Smith, right? They run a outside zone, it looked like, run play action to the right. Everyone on the defense went to that side of the hash or on it except for three players. Smith leaks out into the flat. It's a very simple play. You know, a lot of people run this play. Two blockers, two defenders, one safety, house, touchdown. That was all scheme. The deep touchdown to Smith. They put Smith, there were 12 personnel, two tight ends. Smith is lined up close to a tight end who's off the ball, right? Then they motion the other receiver over to get Smith one-on-one with that safety. The whole team looks like they're playing zone except for the left corner for Oregon, who chases the post route to the tight end. So that leaves no one in that deep third. And so what happens? Newman, you're one of the greatest DBs to ever come out of Oregon. You had a great career in the NFL. Tell me, how many NFL wide receivers could you have covered 15 yards man off in the middle of the field one-on-one?
No.
Probably zero. Because all I have to do is give you one move and you're gone. And that's what happened to Johnson, and Smith is gone, and there's no one out there. That was 100%. I'm Chip Kelly, I want to get my dude in this spot against that guy, and that's a touchdown. And I guarantee you, as someone who's called plays before, that Chip Kelly saw the alignment and said to someone, this is a touchdown. And it was wide open. So there was some scheming going on by Chip, and before Oregon knew what was happening, boom, they're down 17-0. But what surprised me, because I thought they were going to score points, which is why I picked Ohio State. But what surprised me is what happened on the other side. Now, Evan Turner was out, that hurt, but they were locking fools up. Ohio State was. Because we know Dylan Gabriel knows how to read a defense. We know he knows how to get rid of the ball. And we know he's accurate. But there were too many times where he's standing in the pocket, dancing around, looking, because no one's open. He's not missing guys. People are not getting open. They were getting pressure on him, and they kept him in the pocket, and they were able to sack him. I think that's what surprised me the most. But Chip, you know, one thing I just want to say about Chip, there are a lot of people trashing Chip when the coaching job was open, talking about how they didn't want Chip, the game has passed Chip by, blah, blah, blah. I still believe that Chip come here with the NIL and recruiting and money and throwing around the transfer portal, he would have gotten talent, he would have done well. But I think we saw an example of a legitimate guru, high-end coordinator taking a young Dan Lanning and his staff to school on that day. And that's not really a detrimental thing to say, because you have to grow up and take your lumps as a coach. You just do. Dan's a kid. Coaching standards, he's 38. He's not even 40 yet. And so I think Dan learned a lot from that game. I think he's going to learn a lot from this season and be better forward. But that was a great team that came out with a great scheme and just dominated.
Joey.
Are we going to a commercial, or can we talk about this?
Go ahead. We can do whatever. It's the final show of the season.
All right. So I agree with this. We got out schemed, Chip to our defense. I don't necessarily, and here's the thing that I see what you're saying, and let me preface by saying, and like Anthony did, they beat us. Like every facet of the game, they beat us. You know, that's it, done. What was confusing to me is what happened offensively. We didn't run the ball at all to start, right? So we put ourselves behind the chains, and then are trying to get the ball. When the ball does come out of our hand quickly, they rallied and tackled really well. And then when we held on to it to try and push it down the field, we get sacked. what it created is this situation where we're down 17, we're down, what was it, 24, however it played out. And now we had to start pushing it down the field, or felt like we had to press. There were a couple times, and one in particular after we had scored 2 straight touchdowns, where it was second and 10. And Dylan had a square out to the right side. Right? They were running like a smash concept, and he had a square out to take it, to make it, take 6 yards and make it 3rd and 4. Instead, he held on to it and took a sack, and it was 3rd and 17, and we punted, and there went any momentum, right? It was this so I wouldn't necessarily say that Chip out-schemed us on that side of the ball. I still can't quite figure out, 33 is a really good player. Sawyer, that's his name? Really good player. It was this really interesting combination of not being able to run the football, which then put us behind the sticks, which then forced Dylan to hold on to the ball, which then put the offensive line in a bad situation, which then created sacks, which then made Dylan antsier than he normally is in the pocket, which then created the situation where he felt like he had to push it down the field, and therefore he passed up things underneath, because it was this really damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing as the game started to go on. So I agree with with the majority of what you were saying, but I think that there are some things that Oregon could have done offensively to dig themselves out of it. But it was just, look, it was tough when you're down by 4 scores, 34-0 coming in, or 34-0 before halftime. You're just trying to claw at anything that'll work. But that was dumb.
Yeah, Jordan James had 17 yards rushing in this game. In the first game, he had 118.
We're going to step aside for a second here, but when we come back, we'll talk more about what this loss means for the regular season. Undefeated in the regular slate, but you get bounced in the first round of the playoff essentially for you. What does it mean? We'll let you know when we come back on Talkin Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Well, for Oregon, they go 13-0 in the regular season, undefeated, Big Ten Conference champions in their very first year. They get the first round bye in the playoff, the number 1 overall seed. But Anthony, you lose to Ohio State in the way that you did. It was swift. There was no question about it. You're down 34-0 at one point. Does this diminish the regular season that Oregon put together at all? How do you digest this year when it ends on that kind of note?
As a fan, no. You shouldn't. You're 13-1. You're the Big Ten champions. The ultimate goal is to win a national championship. You understand that. And it's hard to do. It's not impossible because it happens, but it's hard. You got to deal with injuries and other teams that are good. But to play like Oregon did this past season, you make us proud. I'm a competitor. So, right now I'm like, I don't care. You didn't win the national championship. I'm kind of upset. That's how a competitor is. That's how a guy who plays the game, he wants it all. And right now it's time to get to work. That's my mindset. But when I look back at the whole season, the coaching staff did a great job with the kids. The kids did a great job providing us, a lot of things to cheer for. You got next year. You move on. What else can you do? Another team, which I hope now wins the national championship, you can say, well, we lost to the champions. We lost to the best team in the country. Other than that, it's hard to digest. 13-1, yeah, but you didn't win the whole thing, and that's hard.
Yeah, Aaron, it's interesting because if you were to compare this with the other 2 teams that made it to the national championship, the team that lost to Auburn, undefeated, they lose in the championship game. At least they're playing in it, right? The second team, Marcus Mariota wins the Heisman. That was a new height for this program. That was almost something that, listen, we accomplished that this year. This team, obviously, a Big Ten Conference championship and undefeated, but I went back to something I said before this game started. Both these teams will be disappointed to lose at this point in the round. I think this loss feels different if it's the semifinals or if it is the championship game because you got a little bit further. But what do you make of this loss and the way that it impacts the regular season?
Well, I think the margin of victory makes it worse had they lost a 33-30 game, which was my call, I'm still baffled it wasn't someone like that. Then I think you walk away disappointed, but you feel like, man, you in dogfight against a really good team you think is going to win it all, and you can live with that easier than just basically having a no-show. Clearly, there's been some devastating losses in the history of this program in terms of getting in the way of winning a national title. And I think that's one of the things that's going on here with a lot of fans and a lot of people and former players, is that the Ducks have become one of the upper echelon programs that hasn't won it all. Now, just listen to this list. If you look at the greatest programs of all time, right? We're talking about not the last 10 years, just of all time. Ohio State, LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Michigan, Notre Dame, Texas, Georgia, USC, Tennessee, Nebraska, on and on. Auburn even won a national title. They've all won national titles, and Oregon has beaten most of them in some capacity. They haven't played Alabama, and they lost to Georgia, but a lot of these teams they've beaten, right? The 2003 win over Michigan, huge. The 2007 win over at Michigan with the Statue of Liberty, right? Huge. The wins over Ohio State, huge. There's been some big marquee wins for this program. They even beat Oklahoma, right? But they haven't won it all. And so that's building to a crescendo of angst for this fan base and for some of the former players. And we came into the season, all I kept hearing was, this is the greatest roster in program history. I don't know how many times I heard that. Now, given the NIL and given the transfer portal, you're able to do things that other coaches weren't able to do, and you're able to stack some talent. And so that raises hopes that you're going to get through finally and do it. And you're ranked number 1, and you're 13-0, and you dominated the Big Ten by beating 3 marquee programs, or 4, all 4 really, in that conference. And so to have it fall apart like that is definitely devastating. But I just urge fans, listen, we're in a new era. When you fell short in the past, the way to get back there was so tight, right? The BCS era. I mean, 2 teams can make it. The playoff system, 4. Only 4 can make it right now. 12 can make it. And Oregon, with its resources and Lanning, are going to be in a position where I believe they should make the playoffs 50% of the time. Now, some people go, 50%, we're going to be there every year. Well, you never know. We'll see how things go. But 50% is pretty good, right? That means the next 10 years, you're going to have at least 5 more cracks at this. There's going to be other opportunities. So don't be too depressed over this, but I do understand that there's a great deal of angst being built up amongst the fans and the former players.
Joey, you're a fan and former player. How do you feel?
It was dumb. How do I feel? I think Fentress really kind of hit it on the head when it comes to the angst that's built up, right? When we got there in 01, or I got to the edge in 01, you felt like, all right, here we go. We got the foundation set, and now we're just gonna, we're gonna start building off of that. And then, Dennis's knee in 07, and then Dyer's forearm in 2010, and then Marcus's team just runs out of gas. I think if Devin Allen was healthy, they probably would have won.
Or Carrington plays.
Yeah, exactly. And then 19, the loss down at Arizona State. We've had these things where it's like, okay, here we go. We're going to finally break through. Okay, here we go. We're going to and this one felt different. This one felt different because we were the top dog heading in. Right?
And you'd already defeated Ohio State. That's the other part of this.
We were the team that there were 12 teams in the playoff. Of the other 11, we'd already beat 3 of them. Right?
Yeah.
We were head and shoulders, the team coming into this playoff. And I think that's why it feels different right now, because this was the year that it felt different coming into the postseason. Previous years, I was like, oh God, here we go. We can do this. This year, I was like, yeah, we're on top. And everybody else needs to come catch us. And they did. And that's dumb.
Think of the end of Star Wars, right? You're riding this journey with Luke Skywalker, and you're going to attack the Death Star, and man, we're going to blow it up and save the rebellion. But instead, 4 minutes into the attack, Darth Vader comes out and just shoots Luke, and it's over. That's how this was. You had all this hope, right? And it's anticlimactic, and the evil empire came out, and Darth was like, who's this little punk kid? Done. Star Wars over. That's how this felt.
Yeah. And the tough thing is with Ohio State, Oregon is 2-3 in their last 5 games against Ohio State. The 2 wins, regular season wins for Ohio State. They've defeated Oregon in the Rose Bowl, the National Championship, and the Rose Bowl. in those situations. So it's just when you win those big games as well, too. When we come back, we're going to talk about this college football playoff. A lot of people not really liking the format when all 4 teams that had byes lost their opening game. We'll discuss when we come back on Talkin Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. The college football playoff this year made its 12-team debut, and many people were excited. The regular season games and conference championship games meant so much down the stretch, but then when you get to the playoff, there's been a lot of complaining, a lot of arguing, and the fact that all 4 teams that had byes in the first round, all 4 conference champions, lost their game to teams that played the round before. Anthony, when you look at this situation that 7 out of the 8 games have now been decided by double figures, and all 4 teams that did have the bye loss, what do you make about this? Because there were some people thinking 26 days off for Oregon and having to go through Christmas and having to do all the bowl nonsense that you typically do at the Rose Bowl. It was hard to get into rhythm versus an Ohio State team that had a home game and had a chance to ramp it up 10 days before you, maybe felt fresher and more game ready. I'm curious about your perspective on this.
Well, I don't care about those other teams. Oregon got their butts whipped, period. If they had, 28 days, 40 days, 5 days, they got whipped. Ohio State came to play. And I say again, when you have guys who can play the game at a high level, Jeremiah Smith, I don't care who you are, and I don't care how many days you had off or you didn't have off, you're not going to guard that dude. You're not going to stop him. So that was the problem with Oregon trying to deal with dudes that they couldn't stop. And then the team played well together. I do know this as a defender, and maybe you guys don't know this, but when you have time off and you take those byes, did in the league for a long time, when you came back and you start playing in that first quarter, the game was much faster for you. You couldn't tackle like you wanted to because you can't do it in practice. You can't mimic the games. So that was a problem for us as defenders, as defense, trying to understand the angles. Okay, oh, wow, that guy's faster than I thought. Whoa, I got to adjust my angle here. So it takes a minute to come back and get back into that, now the game slows down for me a little bit. Yes, maybe it was a problem, and maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I just know that Ohio State just said, I don't care how many days you had off, we're kicking your tail. And Oregon couldn't do nothing about it.
Aaron, I know we talked about this a little bit via text, and things got a little dicey between us for the most part.
Newman was trying to get my
address. You feel like it had no
man.
impact whatsoever having this much time off versus teams that
No.
did.
I mean, look, I'm not going to disagree with anything Newman said. I mean, I do think it can be a factor. It's sort of pick your poison, right? You want to have some rest, get some time off, more time to prep, or do you want to maybe be a little sharper? I don't think that had anything to do with the 0-4 record. I mean, for teams that had to bye. First of all 4 teams were underdogs. 2 of them shouldn't even been in the top 4. I'm sorry, Arizona State and Boise State should not have been top 4 seeds. That's ridiculous. And Georgia lost the starting quarterback. So it's a little bit skewed right there. And I don't believe that, maybe Oregon falls behind 10-0 because they're rusty, but it was 34-0 at one point. So clearly, I think they would have lost anyway. That said, I'm all for going back and tweaking this thing. I mean, I'm looking right here. Oregon played Penn State December 7th. Why can't the first round be December 14th? And then the quarterfinals are the 21st, right? And then the Final Fours around New Year's.
Because the Rose Bowl's always on New Year's. That's why.
Well,
that's
then
reason
put the Rose Bowl in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's things you can do to mitigate everything. When I was a kid, I was told they didn't have a playoff because it was going to interfere with the kids' studies. I was told that as a kid, and I believed it because I was 9 and didn't know any better. Every single thing that anyone's ever said about why you can't do something in college football has all been garbage because eventually they changed it, and then magically those reasons went away. So they can fix this too to take that situation away. But they have to fix the seeding. At the end of the day, Oregon was probably going to beat Ohio State anyway, but you shouldn't have had to play Ohio State in the quarters. That said, Ohio State lost to Michigan, which was a bad loss, which made them 10-2, which kind of justified almost their 8th seed, even though we all believed they were better, right? But this is not supposed to be about belief. It's supposed to be about what you did. So it's kind of a dicey proposition there, but they can do things to make the seeding better, and I think they can tighten the gap to make that layoff not as long and improve the overall product. This was year 1. I do believe it'll get better.
Joey.
if I'm not mistaken, the team that's played the best, I mean, other than Ohio State, of the teams that lost was Arizona State, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're only as, to me, like, all of this feels like going back, and the reason we're having this discussion is because we looked at this and thought Oregon and Ohio State are the two best teams, and they're probably going to be end up playing each other in the quarterfinals, and that's shouldn't happen. So let's change it. Like, you're only as good as your record is, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to put, to me, this feels similar to the argument of like whether Alabama or who are the other SEC teams that
Florida
thought
State,
they should?
SMU, Ole Miss, South Carolina.
South Carolina, like all the teams that people said that they should have been in there. Well, but they weren't. Like why was Ohio State the 8th seed? Well, because they lost. They lost to Michigan. Like at a certain point, you gotta go by. You gotta go by who you are. Like you are who you are who you put on paper. You are who you put. What your record says. Like. So Ohio State was an 8 seed that was a really good football team because, they had a few stumbles during the year. And I don't know. We lost. Stop. Just go win. Don't win, and then we're not talking about this. Like, who cares if Boise's the 3 or Arizona State's the 4?
It's just really interesting if you think about it. If Ohio State had beaten Michigan, then it's Ohio State-Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. If Ohio State wins that game, Oregon gets maybe the home playoff game. They take Penn State seed. It would have been very, very interesting. But either way, this is where we're at. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks to it next year, especially the fact that only one SEC team really got to that round of 4, essentially. But yeah, there's going to be some changes coming. All right, when we come back, we'll talk more about Dan Lanning, the trajectory of this Oregon program. Is Oregon closer, or does it seem like they're further away after this result against Ohio State? We'll let you know when we come back on Talkin Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Oregon season obviously ends 13-1, a loss to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. For Dan Lanning, one of the youngest coaches in all of college football, you look at his trajectory now here, Aaron, and I heard a great quote. Lanning is still, I believe, 13 years younger than when Nick Saban won his first national title. And if you're an Oregon fan, would you bet that Dan Lanning would win a title the next 13 years if he stays at Oregon during that entire time? Or would you go with the fact that he wouldn't? And that's really intriguing right there. Not saying that he's going to mirror Nick Saban and the 7 national titles, but how do you feel about this Oregon program? We mentioned it. You go undefeated, but then does the loss to Ohio State make it seem like that gap from a great team to the championship caliber team and those schools that all won championships that you just named off, Aaron, does that gap feel wider than it's been before? Or do you think Oregon's catching up? It's just a matter of getting the right pieces together in the right season here.
Like I said earlier, Lanning's in the coaching world. Lanning's a kid. He's not even 40 yet, and he has a lot of maturing to do and growing to do. And he's got to take some lumps, and he's taking some lumps. If you look at his record against ranked teams and in big games, he's 13-6, which is good, right? But those 6 losses, a lot of them hurt really badly because of when they happened. But that's all a part of the maturation process as a coach. You have to take a butt kicking like Chip Kelly just dropped to learn and to become a better coach. And Nick Saban's a great example. I mean, I'm looking at him at Michigan State. He went 6-6, 6-5, 7-5, 6-6, then 9-2, right? Then he goes to LSU, and of course he wins a national title there. He goes to the NFL and realizes he don't want to deal with no one like Joey Harrington, right? So then he goes back to college and he wins a bunch of national titles, right? So I don't think Duck fans want to hear, wait a minute, we got to wait 13 more years to win a national title. But, I think you have a great young coach who's learning and is winning along the way and doing some big things. But it's tough, man. The different obstacles you have to overcome just to get in position, right? And Joey ran through some of the bad luck things that happened in the past. It's really daunting. And then once you get into position, you're dealing with really good coaches coaching immensely talented rosters. And you're going to have some luck go your way in order for that to happen. But like I said, I think Lanning's going to have them in the mix most of the time, and they're going to get another shot. And then at some point, eventually, hopefully, maybe, boom, everything clicks and you win it.
Anthony.
Well, I think it starts with recruiting. Dan Lanning's done a great job from a coaching standpoint, and Aaron's right. He's young. He's learning. The staff is learning. They're young. But you have to bring players there. And when you bring players there, they got to be dudes who can play. And again, you look at the teams who win championships, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. Kirby Smart says it's a lot easier to coach dudes who can play. It makes my job easy. So when you're bringing
Novel
these
concept.
It's so simple, but so true.
Yeah, when you bring these 5-star players in, which Dan Lanning is, in the portal, in the recruiting world, he's bringing those top classes. You have to have those guys to compete against the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas. And that's the only way you're going to do this thing. You win with players. Coaches coach, players play. If you can bring the guys in who can play the game and keep them, I think that's the biggest thing now, is trying to keep these players. Every time you turn around, they're transferring, going somewhere else. So that's a whole nother story. But I think Dan Lanning's doing a good job of bringing the talent to Eugene. Now they got to win championships.
Joey, real quick.
What?
Any thoughts? Dan Lanning, Oregon, the gap to greatness as far as winning a championship?
Oh, I love Dan Lanning, and this game was dumb.
Okay.
I don't know. That's kind of where
stick
I'm
with
living
that.
right now.
Game was done. When we come back, though, we are going to talk about some of the tough questions for this Oregon program. Questions that every coach is going to ask about their program in the offseason. We'll let you know what we're thinking when we come back on Talkin Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Oregon's offseason began the evening of January 1st and officially kicked off on January 2nd. We're now about a week into this offseason, and some big questions for this program and some notable players that are graduating. It's not transferring. It's not declaring early for the NFL draft. They're graduating. Essentially no hope of them coming back except for the case of a couple of waiver players like Bryce Betcher. But you've got Dylan Gabriel gone, Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson, Terrence Ferguson, Patrick Herbert, Ajani Cornelius, Marcus Harper, Nishad Strother, Jordan Birch, Keon Hudson, Justin Jacobs, Brandon Johnson, Taisheem Johnson, Dante Manning, Jabbar Muhammad. Those are just some, Jeffrey Bassa as well too. Those are just some of the notable seniors that are graduating. Then you get to some juniors that might declare here in the next couple of days. Then you get to the transfer portal. Aaron, those are some big holes that need to be filled on this Oregon roster. And yes, the recruiting classes have been great, but there's some major questions. And for you, it essentially begins with the quarterback, I imagine.
Yeah, look, here's the deal. He's signing high-end recruiting classes. So at some point, these high school kids need to bubble up and rise up and fill in these spots, right? You can't just run to the transfer portal all the time. But if you're Oregon, you definitely can when you need to, but you got to get a balance in there at some point, right? You have to hit on some of these recruits and then fill in the blanks or the holes with the transfer portal, which they're already starting to do. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to quarterback because you had a luxury these last 2 years of having a fifth-year starter in Bo Nix and a sixth-year starter in Dylan Gabriel this year because everyone got that extra year because of the 2020 pandemic, right? If not for that, those two wouldn't have been playing these last 2 years. So who would your quarterback have been? Well, I don't know. Maybe some other kind of transfer, who knows, or a youngster. Either way, without those two, if you look at the war, wins above replacement, the Ducks might have been 8-4, 9-3 these past two seasons without those two elite level quarterbacks completing 76% of their passes, which is absolutely insane. Okay, so now moving forward, what are you going to do? Are you going to go out in the portal again? There's the people outside of Oregon keep trying to connect ears to Texas or to Oregon because Oregon's done it twice before. Why wouldn't they go get that guy? But people in Oregon tend to believe that Dante Moore is the guy because he was a 5-star recruit in the top 5 quarterback in the country or whatever who had a marginal year at UCLA. So what do? The only people who know for sure are Lanning and Stein because here's the deal. They know what they have because they see him every day, right? Just like with Marcus in 2011. Practices closed that year. And all we kept hearing, though, is this 3-star kid named Mariota from Hawaii who was lighting it up in practice, just destroying. And we're all like, yeah, whatever, we'll believe it when we see it. Well, they were right? Herbert came into fall camp in 16 as the 4th-string quarterback as a 3-star recruit out of Sheldon. And by the end of camp, people were calling him Herbiota because you're like, this guy's a savant. And he became the starter 4 or 5 weeks later, right? But with Ty Thompson, 5-star kid, on this show, I kept saying numerous times, I'm hearing he's not ready. That people who are watching this kid like, this guy's not ready, and I predicted they would get a transfer, right? And what happened? Well, not only was he not ready to play here, he wasn't ready to play at Tulane. He got beaten out there as well. So only Lanning and Stein know for sure. If they believe that Dante Moore is on par with what people thought of Mariota and Herbert, then you go with Dante Moore. You had a year in the system to learn from Dylan and to be groomed. He's your guy. But if you have any doubts, given all the other talent you have and all the other money you spend, you better go out and get a proven quarterback to come in to stabilize that position, or everything else will crumble. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that position. From what George, who's really plugged in with Oregon, he keeps telling me, we keep arguing about this, I think they might go transfer. He keeps telling me, no, Dante Moore's the guy. So we'll see.
Tez Johnson, a few days ago, did say he predicts Dante Moore will be in the running for the Heisman Trophy in 2025.
There you go.
Take that for whatever it's worth. That is a player in practice every single day, catching passes from him. We're not saying that's the standard next year for him.
That's huge.
That is a vote of confidence. Big question for you, Anthony. What do you got for this team?
Well, players do know their teammates.
They do. They ain't going to lie.
Well, it's kind of funny because I remember talking to Patrick Chung back in the day, and I said, who's the toughest running back you ever faced? He goes, oh, that's easy. He's on our football team. He's a redshirt freshman, LaMichael James. I'm like, well, he goes, we can't touch him. He's on the scout team. Like, well, yeah, you do know your players, okay? But I think Aaron's correct in saying that it does start with the quarterback. And I'm a defensive guy. I don't start with the quarterback. They got to run the ball. No. The quarterback touches the snap every offensive snap. It touches the ball every offensive snap. You got to have a guy with experience. If you're talking about winning a national championship, not, winning, 10 games, 11 games, maybe going undefeated in the season. But when you get to that playoff, and when you get to playing against Ohio State and, tough teams that can play, that have a quarterback, you better have one too. Dante Moore, we don't know. I have no idea. And then you have to, help him with the supporting cast. And you're losing a lot of guys on the offense that's a supporting cast. So this will be interesting this offseason.
Joey, real quick. I know we're not leaving you too many crumbs at the end of each segment. No.
This is an easy one for me. I mean, we've got, how many 5-star guys, a 5-star and 2 4-stars and a transfer portal. We'll figure something out at quarterback. If you go back and look at and frankly, look at this year. We saw what happened when Tez was out. We saw what happened to this offense. Right? We saw the massive slowdown. We saw what happened, and I still can't call him by name, when number 4 from Ohio State came and absolutely tore us apart in the Rose Bowl. We've seen what happened when teams like Alabama and Julio Jones. We've seen what happens when, Smith from Devontae Smith. Like, the game has changed to a point where you can be really, really good with good wide receivers, but it feels like in order to be elite, in order to be a championship team, you have to have somebody who is an absolute beast. You have to have somebody who is a go-to, who is a third down, give me the ball. Not a guy that where he's going to be sitting in the zone or run or separating in like a comfort, like a security blanket. That's what Tez was, right? A guy who can keep the chains moving, a guy who keeps the flow going, who's going to end up with 100 catches. But I'm talking about a guy who can go up and make a play on his own. The Dickey, Jurian Dickey is supposed to be a good player coming in last year. I don't know. You know how much I love recruiting. But Decorian Moore is, I don't even know if I'm saying the name right because I don't pay attention to it. But all I've heard is that he is that type of guy who can be a one-on-one nightmare. That's what Oregon needs. When was the last time that we had a true, not a guy who's fast, not a guy who can separate, but a true physical one-on-one nightmare that opponents simply can't cover? Because that's what got us against Ohio State. That's what got us on New Year's Day. That's how the game of football is changing. And until we get one of those guys, that's going to be my question mark going into next year.
Let me come back on this. That is something that I have looked at and analyzed for over a decade. The last time the Oregon Ducks had a number 1 draft pick at receiver was Ahmad Rashad. And then they had Patrick Johnson, and it was a 2nd-round pick third round pick Josh Huff. The rest 4th, 5th, 8th. Even like Dylan Mitchell that one year when he and Herbert were just like basically saying, just throw the ball to me and no one else. He was 7th round pick.
Yeah.
The Ducks have never had that Jamar Chase, that Julio Jones, that Smith, that
Justin
guy
Jefferson.
who, even like Jason Williams. Jason Williams was a big, imposing guy, but he was more straight ahead, big, fast, hands, maybe B- hands, not A hands. But Demetrius Williams was a beautiful wide receiver to watch play, but not big, not super strong, and not great after the catch like some of the other guys we're talking about. There's holes you can find in all these guys who are all great Oregon receivers. And it's wild to me, given how successful the quarterbacks have been. You would think that somewhere along the line, there'd be some marquee dudes at wide receiver that were impact receivers in the NFL as well. So yeah, that is definitely something Oregon has not had in like ever.
All right. When we come back, we're going to go through the schedule, and we're just going to give you our quick predictions on how Oregon's going to do next year as we get close to wrapping things up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Talkin Ducks. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Now all the eyes turn to next season for Oregon as they get set, and obviously big questions at quarterback for Oregon. Is it Dante Moore? Is it a transfer? They've got to fill out a lot of skill position players. But the schedule will also play a big hand in what Oregon does, because obviously in a 19-team conference, you're not going to play everybody. Not every single week's going to be a banger. So here's the schedule for next season. You've got home against Montana State, home against Oklahoma State, at Northwestern, home against Oregon State, at Penn State, home against Indiana, at Rutgers, home against Wisconsin, at Iowa, home against Minnesota, home against USC, at Washington. Looking at that schedule, and Aaron, I know you've dissected this multiple times. Give me your way too early prediction for Oregon's season, and just give me the record and why you think it is real quick.
That schedule is soft, man. Unless USC, if USC,
well, it's a good time to get that schedule next year. I'll tell
USC,
you that. That is 10-2 written all over it.
USC, UW could turn up. Like, things can change in the blink of an eye because of the transfer portal. You got Penn State.
Oh, come on. Come on, Aaron.
I'm just trying to, but
Don't say
on the
USC.
surface,
Don't say
unless
USC.
Dante Moore is a bust, which I think they're going to go with him. Or if they don't, they're going to get a transfer quarterback who's going to still be. I can't see how. To me, 10-2 is easily attainable. With the floor being by disaster 9-3, they could run this table unless, like I said, some of these teams rise up. Because I just don't look at any of these things and go, ugh. I look at them and go, yeah, it's a win.
And Penn State's going to be tough now.
Okay, that's the one. But if you have a high-end quarterback, that's very winnable. But
all right, real quick to the other guys, Aaron. You've been taking way too much of these opening segments.
I'm positive you want to shove me aside.
No, Anthony. You've had your time, Aaron. You've had your time. Anthony, real quick.
I got one loss. Well, maybe. They may run the table, but not a loss. Penn State's going to be a tough game.
11-1, putting it down for you. Joey.
I'll go 11.
11-1. I think 10-2. I think 10-2, they finish top 3 in the Big Ten. They still get into the playoff. They don't have to worry about playing in the Big Ten championship game either. Works for me. All right, when we come back, we're going to wrap up this season of Talkin Ducks. Lots of thank yous to get to and our big hope for next season. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Time to wrap things up, our final segment of the entire season. We're going to share either one hope or one bold prediction. Joey, let's get started with you. What do you got?
Everybody remember a guy named Peyton Manning? The guy who came in who was supposed to be the savior for Tennessee football, win an SEC championship and a national championship. It took him all the way to his senior year to win that SEC championship, which he had to come back to do because he couldn't beat Florida. And then he left before he could win a national championship. You know who won it?
T. Martin.
Year. T. Martin, the next year. Bold prediction. Oregon wins the national championship next year after Dylan Gabriel leaves, and we have the new quarterback, whoever it is that comes in, that nobody thinks can do it, and there you go. Ha.
Anthony.
Well, I got a hope. I hope we win the national championship. I mean, that's all I can say right now.
All right.
I hope we do it.
Okay. I love it. Aaron.
I hope to see more of the high school recruits, rise up through the ranks on the depth chart and claim more starting jobs. I think that's more of a pure way to build things instead of stealing other people's starters. That's a hope. As far as my not so bold prediction, I think the Ducks will be good next year. I don't think they're going to contend for the national title. I think they might make the playoffs. I think it's going to be a little bit of a hiccup, skip year where you're trying to build to the next year, especially if Dante Moore is a guy, because I don't think Dante Moore is going to lead you that far in his first year as a starter, based on what he did.
Second year as a starter, he started at UCLA.
I said,
don't doubt.
Here's my
don't doubt.
Oregon hosts a home playoff game, and we can all go check it out together.
You.
That's my hope. Oregon hosts a home playoff game. We can all enjoy it together.
Yes.
Hey, many thanks for joining us again this season. Whether you're a Duck fan, a Buckeye fan, a lot of our friends in the Big Ten, we appreciate it. We can't wait to bring you more throughout the year and for next season as well, too. It's been a heck of a ride this season. Happy New Year once again to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the season. And from the Ducks here, Ohio State, just go win the thing so we can feel better about this loss. From all of us here, thanks again. And as always, go Ducks.